Okay, guys, before we get into this episode, we had some technical difficulties. For this first part of this episode, you're just going to see some waveforms, and then we'll share the graphics that we talk about, but then you'll eventually see us halfway through it.
This episode is kicking off a series on development. This is a hot couch topic right now. We're all talking about it, so we want to cover it in depth. What we cover in this episode is just the tip of the iceberg. So please, if you already know all the stuff we're talking about in this episode, the first ones are definitely going to be some primers for those who aren't already caught up to date. But as we continue to build the interest in the conversation about this hot topic, you're sure to find things that you haven't heard of before and that you might want to care about. So that's what we're doing here at the Pulse, starting the conversation about the things that matter most.
Welcome to the new Melle Pulse, where we are uniting communities on common ground.
We're telling stories, sharing information, and spotlighting people making an impact in our community.
Our heart is in New Melle, but our pulse beats far beyond the city limits. So the other day, my husband and I were out. Actually, no, we weren't outside. We were inside, and we saw somebody pull up in our driveway. And, out here in the country, if somebody pulls into your driveway, you're like, if it's not Amazon, who is it? What are you doing?
Right.
And so we go out and we realize it's Farmer Terry, the farmer that usually takes care of the plot of land next to us. And he, we've talked to him for years. We've lived there for 17 years. And so every year he'd come do the hay, and we'd always fertilize it and then cut it. We'd always be chatting with him and, catch it up. And so I was actually asking him about, I don't know if you heard about them bringing the water main down Forestdale Road up to New Melle, that New Melle Park right there.
Oh, not a lot.
Yeah,
I think a little bit of murmur, but not a lot.
Which I find really interesting because all of us out here have wells.
Right.
So why are you bringing water main down where there's all wells unless you're planning for future development is my suspicion. I don't really know. That's kind of a different topic. But anyway, I brought it up with him because I was curious what he thinks about it.
Right. Hear what the farmer has to say.
And the interesting thing is I'd asked him, and I can't remember the exact date, but his family has been here since, I think he said like the 1850s, somewhere around in there. So They've been around here forever. Yes. So we just kind of got to talking, and it brought us more into like the development topic. And he told me a stat that I had to look up afterwards because I was like, no way. But they are saying that we are losing 2,000 acres of farmland a day in the U.S. currently.
Per day. 2,000 per day.
Which equates to roughly 730,000 acres of farmland lost annually. That's crazy. That's kind of the story that's happening out here. We're seeing the farmlands, the older generation is passing away and the family doesn't want to take care of it, so they sell it. And now we got all these developers popping up, which we can see that down Hopewell. That's like the cusp, right? Where like a lot of this growth is coming.
It's been crazy to see Hopewell go from, that's the road that I grew up on. Hopewell at Highway N there, it was just fields. And I remember when Dwella across from Highway N was just fields. And now it's like, man, you get out at 3:30 p.m., Hopewell and N, and it's like, you might be waiting to get into Highway N for like 10 minutes. That's actually like might be a quick time.
I was going to say that's very quick. I work from home. And so when I'm planning my errands for the day, I will do everything at all costs to try to avoid going out between like 3:30 and 6, especially if I'm trying to go to like the Lake St. Louis, O'Fallon area.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I actually even had talked to another New Melle mom recently, and she was talking about how she only goes to Washington now. Because if you think about it, really the back way, Washington isn't that far.
No, it's not.
I think I'm going to start doing that because
it's a pretty drive too.
It's a beautiful drive. It's quiet, but I just can't. The traffic is so insane. And that's one of the things with Hopewell and N, they're going to put in a light because that even with the adjustments that they did so that those roads now are like directly across from each other and not quite on that same turn it was, but it's still a little bit on a turn. There's still accidents happening all the time.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the number of houses that are in the Harvest subdivision that they're building right there is, just the traffic flow already before the subdivision was there was a lot of people turning into Hopewell because Hopewell is a cut through for a lot of people who got to head out and get on Highway 40.
Yeah.
And so, or take 364 when they did the Page extension, then it was like, boom, I'm hitting on Hopewell because it was easy. So now we have this situation where right there at that funnel, at the mouth where Hopewell's going to dump out into a bigger, highway, we're going to have is it 800? I think it's 800 or 700 homes, or I mean,
in that little, I've heard 1,000. It's a lot. I don't have the exact number. We'd have to check on that, but it is a lot. And I was driving double D because I'll try to take double D to avoid stuff, and there was a whole bunch of cars in front of me. I want to say like at least 6 or 7, and they literally all turned down Dyer Road in front of me. Because then they're connecting from Dyer to, which that's a whole nother thing. You know, they're working on the Lake St. Louis extension right there, or they're trying to cut through some more woods and some more, you know, nature preserve lands.
Did you have some screenshots of Hopewell?
Yeah. So I wanted to show you that because I was on the Friends, the Friends of St. Charles Historical Society Facebook page, and this guy, Drew Walters, had been sharing these
We'll put a link down.
Yeah. He had been sharing different GPS, Google Map stuff of certain areas, you know, over time, showing all the growth. And he actually just posted the other day, Hopewell and N. And I was like, oh my gosh, let me look. So check this out. This is 1995, okay? Obviously, you can still see, here's N.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's jump up. Oops, not that. No. Okay, so now we're going to make a big jump. We're going to go up to 2006. Okay. You still see, you know, we're still seeing from farmlands, right? But look at all this on the right side. So like over here.
Okay, right.
Over here is where the development is going to jump. So now we see, now we've paved a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Bulldozed a bunch, cleared a bunch.
Yeah, those are those subdivisions off Dyer.
That was some trees, but there was definitely still some, you know, farmland that was open. Now we jump to 2012. Boom, those houses are built. Then we go to 2016, more of that neighborhood.
We made a big jump over here with Dyer.
On the other side, Dwello. Yeah. Mm-hmm. On the other side up here, we got this stuff happening. Now it's being more built, clearing more, building out more here. Now we jump to 2022. All those are built in.
Right.
You know? But look, we still have this chunk of farmland here.
Right.
Or do we? 1 year. 1 year.
Scalped at the surface of the earth, man.
And some of these are apartments, which I did not realize until I saw them building it. And obviously, you know, okay. But this Highway N is still 2-lane road, no middle lane, no turn lanes.
Oh man, if you go further, you know, towards Highway Z, I mean, Highway N will be backed up for like, I mean, at least 1.5 miles, 2 miles.
My goal is to get drone footage of that because it is mind-boggling that's our life.
Right.
And they don't have that. They're going to put in a light there at Hopewell and N, but that's not slated till I think next year.
But there's already people living in the subdivision now.
No, but we're gonna build all the houses and we're gonna just shove all of the infrastructure and overpack it, and then we'll figure that out later. And I got some insight from the council on that. I'll show you here in a little bit. So here's 2023, and as we know, 2025, boom, like we've got these neighborhoods are happening. But let me take it a step further, because when you're looking at Google Maps, you know, like sometimes it's like the perspective is a little off. So I took my drone out recently, and
oh my gosh.
So here now, what's cool about this shot is, let me pause it for a second if I can. If you look, this is Hopewell. This right here is Hopewell, and here we're looking towards like O'Fallon and more towards 64. I mean, look, you can see all the sprawling development. Okay. So we keep it going. Building these houses, there's still like a few more phases. Here's all the room for more phases. And now here we're turning towards New Melle, and bam. Look at that. I mean, you can see a little bit of development over here, but like, look at all that woods. I mean, that's where you're looking towards our area, towards where we are sitting right now. So that Hopewell is really the line, you know, where they've creeped up into.
Wow, that's some really amazing footage. I mean, it's you captured it beautifully. It's also like, I mean, it's kind of sad, you know. It's like I remember when we did the food co-op video, you had a shot that was kind of similar, and it zoomed over, but like this really tells it. And maybe it's just more close to home because I mean, I I drove this road every day as a kid, you know, and it was like you'd see the farm fields, you'd see the corn, you'd see the soy, whatever. But, you know, you didn't see a bunch of houses. You didn't see them so close together. You didn't see it was really hard to drive through there when it was just all the topsoil had been stripped off, and it just was it was all barren.
Well, and then I'd seen a lot of murmurs on the New Melle Facebook page about then with all that when they had scraped it all, and then the rains would come through, and then it would flood over Hopewell.
Yeah, it would. And Darden Creek was it was mud brown, you know, and so it's and these are things that, you know, the environmental implications here. We're not going to cover that in this episode. There's a whole nother thing about food displacement and, you know, habitat displacement, all kinds of things to be really considering. But let's talk a little bit about how do we get to this place, you know, because this isn't just randomness. No. You know, there's purpose behind this. There's a plan.
Absolutely.
And so you've kind of enlightened me here, Liv, with you know, every county, city, municipality, whatever, will generally have a 10-year plan or some sort of a plan for a set length of time. And so our county, St. Charles County, the county that New Melle is located in, that we're filming from here today, we have a 10-year plan.
We do.
And why don't we? Can we take a look at that plan?
Yes.
Or can you tell us about the plan?
Before we get into the plan, I definitely want to show that, and I definitely want to talk about that, because I think that's a very important thing that I didn't even know. I really didn't understand 10-year plans until I really started getting involved in the tall tree development that they were trying to approve off of Double D. Which has since been approved and annexed into O'Fallon, and I think they're calling it the Bush Wildlife Highlands or something like that. So in that process, I really started to learn more about what is a 10-year master plan and what does it mean. And on top of that, though, going to the council meetings, those are the people in charge. St. Charles County Council and the St. Charles County Planning and Zoning Committees are the ones that are in charge of all of this, essentially. And
it is any citizen of the county can go to these meetings, correct?
Can go to, yes, the open public meetings for these. Now, they do sometimes have closed door meetings that you cannot go to. I don't really know what goes on in those meetings or anything, obviously.
Sure. But important to note that all of the records, the meeting minutes from the public meetings, the decisions that have been passed, these can all be accessed from the St. Charles County website. We'll put a link to that stuff down below in the description.
Yeah, and even better is they actually also video record all of their meetings. So there is a YouTube channel that you can look for St. Charles County, Missouri, and then they have playlists for the planning and zoning. They have the playlist for the county council meetings. Right. I think there's a couple other boards or whatever that they also do. But the interesting thing that I just has literally still been rattling in my brain ever since I went to that meeting. So when they first brought Tall Tree up, the citizens out here was very upset because Double D, as we all know who drive it every day, is not safe. Yes, they did some improvements, you know, in the last, I don't know, what is that, the last 10 years or whatever, where they added a 12-inch shoulder to be more safe, but we're still having accidents. Well, there's still no entrance and exit onto these, you know, these neighborhoods that it's a 55-mile-an-hour highway. So you're having to go from turning straight onto the road and get to that speed, and you've got hills and you've got curves and
the problem is that, you know, because this area, the southern region of the Boone Township where we're at, Augusta and Defiance, does have the tourist attractions with the wine attractions. Yeah. We do get a lot of visitors that come out to these roads.
Absolutely.
And as we see more development, we're seeing more people who have not grown up in this area. And so this isn't about you haven't grown up in the area, you should know my roads. Mm-hmm. But the point is that the infrastructure isn't there to support it. And this isn't a biased opinion. We can look at the statistical deaths that are happening. We can look at the wrecks that are happening. And so it's just something, you know, so people understand you're not just being they're not safe. No, this is it's just empirical data. This is, you know. Right. Which is a whole nother I would love to get into, and you know, trying to better understand what can our county currently support as far as
police, fire, emergency EMS.
Yeah, I would love to have
services.
some first responders, even our local guys here, just like what's the load looking like for you in a year or two?
Yeah.
When
or what is it like now?
Yeah.
Are you guys, is it fine? Do we need to be concerned?
What resources do you need in order to do that? And do you foresee themselves getting those resources? Right. Are you going to be able to handle?
Yes. So in all this, in one of the meetings, in this initial tall tree development, which, let me just go back to a couple notes just to give you guys a quick brief. So when this first came up onto...
So Liv is also, you're bringing up the tall tree just so people, we follow you. You're bringing up tall tree as kind of a case in point of an example of like, well, there was this plan, and then clearly there was some community feedback about the plan.
Absolutely.
And so you want to tell us about the...
Yeah, I just, and I'm bringing up, and I would like to cover this whole situation in more detail. And part of the reason why I'm bringing it up is not only as an example, but because it is partly the case that spurred me to really get passionate in understanding what is going on and how does this all work.
Right.
And also, it didn't just spur me. There was a whole group of citizens that it really, and specifically people that live directly on that double D, that are going to be affected daily. Now, I don't live right there, but I'm still going to be affected because I drive that route every day. So they actually formed a group, Citizens for Smart Growth. That may not actually be the exact title. I need to look that up. St. Charles Citizens for Smart Growth.
We'll put a link below.
We will also put but definitely, absolutely, please join their Facebook page. They have done amazing work. They have formed some sort of, I don't know if it's an LLC or whatnot, but they hired a lawyer. They actually have filed injunctions against O'Fallon to try to stop the annexation. It is a whole mess. And when I was doing my research for this episode last night and going back through all that to remind myself of how everything took place, it relights my fire because I'm just like, man, listening to some of these people and listening, the citizens came out and were so passionate and had such valid concerns. And I sat there and watched time and time again, not planning and zoning. Now, planning and zoning did not agree with it. But then the county eventually approved it. And even though all these citizens are there, speaking against it, writing in against it, they still approved it.
So I can hear in your voice too that it's like there's a lot of passion and there's probably a little bit of frustration, and I think it's important. Would you paint a picture? So there essentially was this decision that needed to be passed about the tall tree development, and a lot of citizens came in. Right, I'm just trying to kind of summarize here. And
because just to interject, they were trying to the purpose of this specific meeting was to rezone the property from agricultural to R1E single family residential districts with a minimum lot size instead of 3 or 5 acre lots. That's what we were 3 or 5 acre lots out here. A minimum lot size of 60 feet.
So it's a pretty.
So it was 209 at the time. It was 298 acres, and they wanted 452 lots. So you do the math. And that's a whole other thing, which again, we'll get into the details, but that was part of the frustration too, is the way the county is calculating the acreage per lot is not a true 1-to-1. They're saying that we have this big plot of land, but they couldn't develop part of it because it's floodplains. So they're like, we're leaving these trees, but it's floodplain. Now they did make a comment that we could build dirt up, we could add dirt in there and then build houses, but if it's a flood, that's a whole nother agriculture, that's a whole geographical environmental concerns. So, they try to position it that, we're doing, we're going to leave the trees. Well, you have to, because you can't develop on farmland. Right. So then they're condensing all of their development into a part of that land. But they're using the numbers of the whole, so they can boost it and make it seem like, there's more lots per acre, or no, more acres per lot. But really, when you look at it, it's like, no, you have, a couple thousand square feet lot.
So they don't want to lose down on the revenue of the amount of families they can have buying the houses, but they didn't want to rezone. So essentially, they had to vote on this, right? They had to get passed, and so there was a very large open public meeting. Yeah. And at this meeting. From my understanding, the room was so packed I believe did the AC stop working or something?
Oh
like
yeah, that was one of the most recent ones. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Two different. So I'm going all the way back. I'm going back to when this first got brought up in 2023.
Oh, okay.
There was an interesting, and what I'm going to show you guys is there was a lot of community interest, so much so that they moved. Normally they have these meetings in St. Charles at their on Main Street. It's like one of their government buildings. But when they have such community interest, if they can't fit everybody, they will move it to a new location. And so they did. They brought it to the Family Arena, and it was a packed house. And they allowed people to go speak. But then at the end, they're like, okay, now we're not going to let any more people speak on this topic. We have to move on. And so then everybody left. And after everybody left, the county executive got up and gave this speech and was addressing this specific development, but also talking about our county as a whole and what the plans are. And I just think it's a very, very important, like if you have not been aware of this and you don't really know what's going on, but you know that there's a lot of development and you're not super happy with it, this is
kind of the keystone of the 10-year master plan.
Not even the keystone of the 10-year master plan, but I think it's the keystone of the mentality of the council.
Okay, so the thought process behind the whole thing. All right, let's take a look.
Let people know ahead of time when it's going to be.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry, and I do think they did end up tabling it this time
at the next meeting.
On this meeting. That's what he's talking about here.
I want to talk a little bit about not necessarily that in particular, but that whole area in general. And first of all, let me just give you a little history. First of all, the adoption of planning and zoning. St. Charles County adopted planning and zoning in 1954. And when they adopted it, 11 of the 12 precincts in the city of St. Charles voted for it, and only 8 of the 19 precincts elsewhere in the county voted for it. It was something that the rural people in St. Charles County were very much against, and I assume it was the same reason many today, just don't like the idea of government telling them what to do. But another bit of history here that I really want to make people to understand is this adoption of the 5-acre minimum. I think, Mr. Brazel, you may have sponsored that bill back when I was the director of administration. And you know why you sponsored it. I know that one of the reasons the administration endorsed it and worked for its passage was that what we saw in the past was people moving to St. Charles County when you could put a house on 3 acres in an agricultural area. So what we were seeing was people coming out in neighborhoods developing as 3-acre lots. And that was perfectly legal. And no one really had a problem with it until it became time to decide, for you all to decide, how the rest of that area is going to be developed. And we had a lot of people showing up saying,
okay, so one, I just want to call out that language right there, that nobody had a problem with it until you all, talking about the county council, needed to decide what to do. So that language right there is already making my spidey senses go up, because I'm like, well, wait a minute. You're putting the power on the council, and aren't you supposed to be representatives of your people, right?
Aren't you supposed to be representatives of the people?
Okay, so
that's already 3-acre lots. Well, maybe that's what it should be. But I think that's something that the council should decide through the master plan and your various zoning activities. So that's why.
So again, the council should decide through the 10-year plan and their planning and zoning activities, okay?
That's why I think, that's why I supported the 5-acre minimum. The fact of the matter is, all of us, well, I have a vision for that second district. I have a vision for each of your districts as to what I think it ought to be. And more importantly, I guess, as being the only one elected countywide, I have a vision for the entire county.
Boom, right there. I also want to call that out. And actually, I think I want to backtrack a second. And I want you guys to re-listen to that. As the only elected countywide official, he has the vision, what he wants.
The fact of the matter is, all of us, well, I have a vision for that second district. I have a vision for each of your districts as to what I think it ought to be. And more importantly, I guess, as being the only one elected countywide, I have a vision for the entire county. It's important that each of you have a vision, not only for your district, but for the county as a whole. Now, there's some of the things that we've been talking about here. I just want to remind you, really aren't relevant. There's been questions about...
Real quick, interject some context. Right now, what he's talking about is that he's now back to talking specifically about this tall tree development off of Double D. And if you go back and you listen to a lot of the citizens' comments, there was heavy concerns on traffic and safety. There are heavy concerns on the school districts being overloaded. Can they handle that amount of people influx coming in when they're already loaded? And so he's going to start addressing what he thinks about those.
And you all know how that works. Mr. Brazel, 10, 12 years ago, when there were half as many people in this district, or a lot less for sure, Highway DD was a very dangerous road.
And when
we went to MoDOT, they said, well, there's not enough traffic on it, we can't do anything. Well, there were people dying, so the county put in half the money, MoDOT put in half the money, and we worked together to get that fixed. That's what's going to happen if that area continues to develop. Eventually, MoDOT, and maybe with our help, and definitely with our encouragement, is going to respond to it.
Tell us about that. That sounds a little interesting.
That part is like the biggest rub for me, because I was talking to a friend about this, and she made such a great point. She has family out in Kansas City, and I have family out in Colorado, and she was talking about the infrastructure out there, and she was like, you can tell they've built the infrastructure first before they brought in the development. And that's the same thing I saw like in where my parents live. There's a lot of heavy growth going on around them, and it has been for years. But they built out the road system. They have a highway that's like, I think it's 5 or 6 lanes. So they built all that before they started bringing on all the development. But what he's saying is, we're going to do it backwards. We're going to cram in all the development, and then MoDOT will catch up with us because it's a money problem.
Well, and to point out too, it's only going to be instigated by problems.
Right.
So if there's more accidents,
there's more,
right? It's kind of like, we'll take action when we have to.
Once enough people die and get hurt out there, then maybe we'll get. Anyway, I'll let you guys decide what you think about that. But just a little bit more here.
The other issue that was raised at the last meeting was the issue of the schools. Okay, the schools are not an issue. In the past, they were a big issue. Back in the 1980s, Francis Howell, the biggest taxpayer in the Francis Howell district, was an apartment complex by Freedom's Road and Highway 94. They didn't have any commercial, they didn't have any industrial, and it was killing them because the houses didn't support. And in 1993, the legislature addressed that issue, and now what the legislature does is, regardless of what your assessed valuation is, they guarantee you money at the 95th percentile. If we don't have the houses or whatever to pay for it in the district, they make up the difference.
Which that doesn't even... He's only talking about monetary there. Like, that's not, we're talking about the schools physically being able to handle the influx of children.
Right. This isn't about the financial resources. It's about the people resources, the infrastructure, the school building itself.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so this is like the last part. There's like 2 points I want you to catch on this part that Steve's still talking about. Okay. And here he's going to talk about what he's seen with the growth of the C. O'Fallon. And if you followed the tall tree development, which is now turned into this Bush Highlands development, which has been approved, which also was annexed into O'Fallon, he kind of talks a little bit about that. And then what I want you to really listen to after that is he starts to talk about his vision for this county. So 2 very important things.
Now, what about O'Fallon? Mr. Baker's district was developed, a lot of it, in the 70s and 80s. Mr. Hammond remembers, Duckett Creek provided sewers. There was a water district that provided water districts. The people that developed it didn't have to go to St. Peter's or St. Charles. They could come to the county. And I wasn't around then, but I think the county did a pretty good job in doing it. Then we had the rest of the Golden Triangle that developed. And there's a big sections of it that were 20, 30 years ago were very rural. When people wanted to develop it, they had to go to the cities because Deckett Creek couldn't serve them. We didn't have any other option. They went to the cities, mainly to O'Fallon, some to Wentzville, some to Lake St. Louis, some to St. Peter's, whatever. Fact is now we do have a Deckett Creek sewer going into that area, and again, that's something you consider. Now, because we didn't have the ability as a county to provide sewer and water, here's what happened with O'Fallon. That's 1969. That's the year I graduated from high school. 77, 86, 2000, 2010, 2020. All right? I don't have a crystal ball, and neither do you. So we can all speculate about what will or won't happen if we don't work with the developer to get something that they can live with and that you can live with. And I just want to really encourage all of you to do that. Now,
if we don't work with the developer, never talked about citizens and what citizens want. So just like to call that out.
You have your own vision. Mr. Brazel's vision is, and he feels very strongly about it. He does a great job of representing the people in his district. But his vision is mainly 3-acre lots. And my vision is somewhat different. I think that the area of the 2nd District is in 2 different watersheds. It's in the Femisage watershed. It's in the Darden watershed. And I feel very strongly that the Femisage watershed, and if you look at it, this is the Femisage watershed. It's mainly forested. It's wooded. The areas that aren't wooded are in creek floodplains. That is the area that I think should be 5-acre lots from now for eternity. No doubt about it. When you look at the Darden area, the Darden watershed, and on that lower end, there's a lot of areas just like Femisage. And those are the areas probably should, in the future, have 3-acre lots. Or maybe even just leave them at 5. But there's a large section of that area you can see that used to be farmland. And again, it's going to have sewers. And I think that's an area where more intense development can take place. If you want a comparison, I think the Femisage probably should develop like Wildwood in St. Louis County. I think this area here probably should develop more like Chesterfield.
Let's go back. Let's go back 5 seconds and let's replay that for everybody.
Yeah, that's really important.
Let's replay that.
So, intense development, Wildwood, the comparisons of Wildwood, and that he wants this Dardenne area, watershed area, to be the next Chesterfield.
Comparison, I think the Femisage probably should develop like Wildwood in St. Louis County. I think this area here probably should develop more like Chesterfield.
Okay, so when we talk about in this episode, we're talking about the 10-year master plan. This is an inkling, this is the executive here. He's not telling verbatim what the plan is, but this is the mentality behind the plan. And so the idea of this episode is to create a conversation around that. Like, how do you, viewer, listener, feel about that mentality? How do you feel about, if you live here in this rural area of St. Charles County, New Melle, Forestell, areas like that, how do you feel about that? Because I know how I feel when I hear those things. I know how Liv feels when he hears those things. And there's a lot of nuance to this. There's a lot of nuance to why the Femisage watershed can only be developed in 5-acre lots. It's not just because it's in, flood creek plains. There's other reasons that are restricting it from being developed that are beyond, the county's control. And so these are huge topics, and we want to kind of like move on, and let's talk a little bit about the master plan now. Yeah,
and I think just to kind of reiterate what you're saying there is that I just don't know to what degree people are aware of the planning and the forethought and the people that have been voted in. And, he was voted in, but all of his terminology and language that he's using is my vision. Joe Brazel, who is the county council over this district, where we are here in New Melle, he has a vision, but my vision, those are the things that really started to spark me, that like, and honestly, like, and when we look at the tall tree development and how many citizens wrote in and emailed and then also spoke in opposition of what they're trying to do, and they still passed it. So it's definitely the language that I'm hearing him saying and the actions I'm seeing the council doing is not reflective of the people that voted them in. It is reflective of what they want for this county. And that's not what this was built for, right? Like, why do we vote then? Like, we vote because we want you to represent us and what we want as a community for our community. And I would say that if you go into a lot of these other places, if you go into the O'Fallons and you go into the Wentzvilles and you go into St. Charles, I don't think people are happy with like the infrastructure or lack thereof. I mean, I constantly hear and I witness it and experience it every day when I'm driving these roads, in just like, there is in my opinion, some sort of lack of foresight when it comes to creating the right infrastructure. It's just like, we just want the money and we just want to develop, to bulldoze. Like, that's to me what I feel like I'm seeing. And that's the part that's like,
well, yeah, no, not to cut you off. I think a big piece too here is that, like you said, and like kind of what you're expressing here is that, you know, people are unhappy, and what's happening is they aren't able to trust anymore that governing authority. So even when it comes to attending those meetings, there's so many people. You know, I had an alderman from St. Peter's reach out to me, and she called me, and we were talking about the co-op and stuff. And you know, I asked her. I told her we were doing this episode, and she said, I told her, well, you know, what can we do, you know, to kind of like help people? And she's like, well, they need to attend the meetings. They need to do that. And I told her, I said, well, it's hard for people to want to attend the meetings when they have no trust, when there's no sense of community with this, when this is, you know, somebody saying my vision. It becomes really challenging for men and women who are running families and households to feel like, yeah, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna put my vote towards that. Right. It's like, no, I'm gonna go out and stake it out on my own land and I'll figure it out.
So at one point he does talk about, and I'll have to find that spot, but he does kind of make that comment that like, people shouldn't have to come to every meeting, and we shouldn't. That's why we elect you. But you guys are doing what you want to do, not what we want to do. So now we do have to show up to every meeting. Right. You know, for me, just personally, like trying to attend those meetings and like the battle fatigue that you get. Somebody named it on one of the social posts, and I truly agree with it, because the amount of like time and energy that you have to put into like research, understand what they're doing, write your letters, you know, all that. Right. You have so much other things to do with your life.
It's an important thing here. And so, you know, in this episode, we're not ending yet, but I really want to hit on, like, we're going to end here with a CTA for the people, but there is actions that our governing authorities need to be taking. And a big one is transparency. And that doesn't mean complacency and just putting the information out there. We're going to talk about that, but transparency is key. It's key to this whole process. It's key to our involvement. It's key to community betterment. It's key to getting people to trust you at the end of the day, no matter what you say or do, trusting you for the values. But we're gonna talk more about that.
You know what though? Honestly though, I think it's even a step further. Like in a lot of the behaviors I witnessed between, like, because I also then had to attend O'Fallon council meetings, because then they started to they wanted to annex into O'Fallon, which they got approved to do, and so we had to go to those meetings. I'm going to try to say this in the most, you know, I don't know, respectful way I can. There definitely appeared to be a lot of dismissive behaviors from council members, that they know better, they're smarter, just a complete lack of empathy for their citizens. And so there was many times where you could tell, like, these citizens are passionately pouring their heart out about the land that they've grown up on, that you are about to forever change. And they're just like, can't even look at them. And some of the people, you know, they're looking at something else, or they're not, you know, and just some of the comments, like, there's like a lack of like empathy and respect for the citizens. I personally feel like I witnessed. And I would be happy to show some certain particular clips from those meetings. And there was a lot of stuff that went online on the different groups about it, and a lot of them were engaging in there too. And so a lot of the comments I saw from some of these council members were just so like, very clearly, you are pro-developer. You are not backing citizens.
Well, and really, they shouldn't be pro anything except pro what the people asked for. And so I think that's kind of the thing here is you're saying, you know, it's like this dismissive attitude. It's like, we, the people, in a peaceful, in a respectful way, need to check and balance, then the people who we have elected in and that who choose to represent us, we need to check the values, because we can't. What good is it to sit here and complain on the couch and be like, I don't like his attitude. It's like we have to take proactive action.
Sure.
So tell us about, we're looking at a master plan now here.
Yeah, so I think the next piece is, the next thing, two things about this for our kind of call to action here is, one, we just want you guys to know where to find this information. Start doing the digging on your own. Start researching. Reach out to some of these other groups that are, that have been working really hard to just kind of get to the bottom of this. Because to your point, there are these 10-year master plans, but we're seeing a lot of exceptions being made to these plans. So are they even being followed? Like, that's a whole topic in itself. And so that call to action is, how do we play the current game, and how do we make our voices as citizens heard more? But then also, like, what if we create something new? Like, what if we go beyond what they've done? In doing research of what Farmer Terry had told me about that 2,000 acres of farmland going away, I came across an organization that actually has been around since the 80s that has been fighting this exact problem, and they're fighting it through, and again, this will be another topic, but they're fighting it through, I believe, some sort of agricultural easements. They've protected 8 million acres of farmland so far. It's called the American Farmland Trust. They have an amazing video that's very moving. It's titled "Saving the Land That Sustains Us." Like, oh my gosh, it is a lot of what we're talking about. So I want to do a lot more research on what they're doing and how that works, and maybe even try to get somebody on. But that's the other thing, is like, this current system that's been built, is it actually working for the citizens? Or do we need to do something else? Like, do we need to take our own power and go somewhere else and say, okay, and I think, like, with the Citizens for Smart Growth, that's partly what they're doing with getting their lawyers and getting involved and challenging the annex laws in Missouri State.
Let's clarify that you're not suggesting anarchy. You're not suggesting but what you're suggesting is instead of waiting for something to happen, taking proactive action
to protect ourselves.
Right, exactly.
Through other legal means that will trump the county.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so then leading into, like, let's just talk about, so we don't make this episode 5 hours long. The next piece is to talk about the 10-year plan. And so the 10-year plan is created by a separate committee, but a lot of that committee is made up of people that are still part of the council and planning and zoning. So it's still some of these same people in these meetings. And they create the plan, and it's actually really interesting, because as you can see here on the screen that I'm sharing, this is the interactive guide that they have, and here on this left-hand side, they'll actually kind of give you summary and statistics of what's going on in the county. What are some current issues being happening? What are their goals and strategies, which are really important to take a look at. Everybody should be pulling up the St. Charles County 10-year master plan. Look at your neighborhood, look at your area, read some of these statistics. They very clearly talk about where they want this county to go. We just heard from the county executive, his vision, and it's very clear that is the vision they've been working towards. I think this is a great place to start to really look at what's the data that they have that they're using, and what are they saying. And then I think our next step is what I'd like to bring up, and next time, and I want to get some more data around, is this is the plan, but how close are they actually following it?
Right.
What exceptions are actually being made in every single one of these cases? How much acreage did that affect? Because I think what we're going to see is we'll see a trend that's very different from what.
And we're going to be looking at things like conditional use permits and things like that to kind of.
The big thing is rezoning request. It starts with a rezoning request, and then they have conditional use permits so that they could say, like, nope, now we're going to develop a neighborhood here that's, medium density or whatever. And so then there's like a couple layers of approvals that have to happen.
Right.
But yes, I would like to pull data to find out, and there's probably going to be a lot of legwork unless I can find like an AI app to help me or something. But I want to know, at least in the last 5 years, I'd like to go back 10 years, how many conditional use permits, rezoning requests have been brought to the council that goes against the master plan that was approved.
It'd be very interesting to read that, see that.
Because I think, and on top of that, I would really love to get somebody on here from the Citizens for Smart Growth, because they've done a lot of work, and they actually even FOIA'd, which is Freedom of Information Act, the county council, to like really understand all of this. Like, what is actually going on behind the closed doors? What is actually happening in the emails? What is happening in these planning and zonings? Because things aren't adding up. So
yeah, and it's important to say, like, nobody, we're not just an isolated group here. There's so much conversation happening here. The group that you just mentioned, there's a lot of people talking about this. So we just want to spark the conversation around it. I think what we've covered in this episode is a really great primer for those who aren't familiar. And a lot of the stuff I wasn't familiar with, So we are really inviting you to go take a look at this map, take a look at the plan, and get involved. Be inquisitive, be curious. Don't make assumptions. Don't just be enraged, although it might be easy to be, but like, be curious. Want to look for the answers. Ask questions. Call your representatives. I remember Joe Brazel one time, there was some things happening here at the co-op, and he's like, you need to call me. You need to be in touch with me. If these things are happening, you need to call me. And so, if you're in this area, Joe Brazel's our councilman. He's a very, very, very nice man, and he wants to hear from you. So get involved. Talk to those people who are representing you. That's one of the biggest CTAs. And then I know...
And I would like to say real quick, just to interject there, I totally agree. I do want to say that if you get enraged, that's totally understandable. But use that, though, like, take a minute, take a couple deep breaths, but then use that passion to spur your action. Use that passion, use that anger or whatever you're feeling to be involved, to get part of the conversation. And if you are reaching out to council members or you're sending emails, be respectful. Like, be respectful. I know you want to say all the things that I probably want to say too, but they are humans also. And I think, honestly, that is a lot of what I saw in that kind of like resistance behavior between them and the citizens, is like, anytime you feel personally attacked, you're immediately going to put defenses up.
Yeah, don't fight fire with fire. And I think it's important, I would say, get to the heart of what the anger is. Because what the anger is not actually anger. It's really a sadness for what's being lost. And it's like an unwillingness to accept that. That's honorable. But so don't make sure like that is at the forefront. That's like, you are aware, this is your family is here. You've set your family up to live here. So you're seeing this land get lost. Yeah, you're sad about it, and it makes you angry because you're unwilling to accept that. It's okay to be enraged. Yeah. The other thing that we want to impress throughout this whole development series is mainly 3 call to actions. We want you to get involved. The other 2 are really important. We want you to consider values. We want you to consider a value-based approach when you look at your representatives. A lot of times we're looking at an action approach. What are they going to do for the county? But at the end of the day, behind closed doors, when we're not invited to the meetings, we have got to trust those people. And that trust is built on common ground. It's built on shared values. So we need to have people in office that share our common values. So that means asking the questions of our representatives, asking the hard questions, being bold enough to stand up in the middle of the room and asking them a hard question. And we need to be open to the answer, and we need to be willing to find common ground too. And that means looking a little bit harder too, and not just making assumptions.
Right. Well, and to that point, development is going to happen.
Exactly.
Like, that is evolution.
Nobody here is saying that development shouldn't happen. Right. It's about how it happens.
Right.
And this is an argument that they want to say. A lot of people, they want to say, well, what are you're saying we shouldn't develop? And it's like, no, man. It just means that the way that we do it needs to be more sustainable. But most importantly, in this value we're going to stress throughout this whole series is it needs to be transparent. Like, what that means is it can't just be like put out there in a file archive that we have to use FOIA to access. What it means is we need to have our representatives, we need to have our government actually educating the people on why they should care about this. This is why you should attend this meeting. It's very important for these reasons. Kind of decoding what's going on. We're attempting on a very small level to try to do some of that here. We're going to be providing some resources when we get a little bit more time, decoding the meetings, the agendas. Some of these agendas were like 400 pages long. An agenda to a meeting. Now, how are you going to the soccer game in a couple of hours going to read an agenda? I'm not.
No.
You're not going to do it. So we're going to take the time. We're going to take our effort so that you can be informed. We're going to break it down in an easy layman's term, normal people speak way, because that's what government needs to do. Mm-hmm. Instead of cloistering things behind closed doors, we need to make it accessible for people. That is what accessibility is. And when we do that, we're going to start to see, you know, if it's really going to work for us. And then I love the final thing that you were saying in there. It's like, let's not be afraid to build something on our own. You know, like, let's not be afraid to, and this doesn't mean, again, like build some separate system. It just means it's exactly what we're doing here at Freedom's Community Center. It's what other community associations are doing. You know, building infrastructure and resources for people to gather, congregate, make decisions, and take action together. That's all that it is. Mm-hmm. That's all it is.
Yeah. I do want to say one thing too, like you were saying about the values of these officials that we're voting for. I think that is super important, because I feel like, and we see this all the time in politics, if your candidate is spending so much time dogging the other candidate and not actually talking about what they want to do for us, or how they plan to do that for us, or what, that's to me a big red flag. And I feel like we have gotten so, like, I'm team red and I'm team blue, and I'm not even gonna consider your candidate, because like, I want us to all take all these team jerseys off, like take them off, because it's not serving anybody.
What did you say yesterday? You said put on the
human jersey.
Right. Yep. Put on your human jerseys.
And really start looking at these as people, and like, what are their values? And when we say values, it's like, is there integrity? Is there empathy? Can they literally be empathetic towards the people that they are serving? Do they have a public servant's heart? Or are there ulterior motives? Personally, I feel like if you're on a county council and you're in charge of planning and developing out our county, you should not be able to be on the board if you work for a developer, if you are a real estate agent. I feel like those are major conflicts of interest, but apparently that's totally acceptable. And so we see people on our council that work for some of these big developers that are benefiting from these decisions. To me, that's a problem. To me, I would like to address that. Like, I would like to, like, can we create, you know, I don't even know what the order, that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down.
No, it is. It is. It's accountability systems. And at the end of the day, Liv, it's like, it has, like, with those who we vest power into, there is such a greater responsibility to use it wisely.
Right.
And if you don't use it wisely, you're going to have podcasts like this talking about you. You're going to have people starting organizations and filing injunctions against you.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. Your people don't have to be doing this to you. Your people can be supporting you. But when it's cloistered behind a dark room, and when we have to,
and it's your vision, what about the community's vision?
That's what's important. That is, because that's who's all here. And at the end of the day, you know, we all are sharing this earth. We all need to have a respect for the land. We all need to be considering what it's going to be like in 7 generations, not just tomorrow. Not the capital that's going to come from the next subdivision, but the capital that our great-great-great-grandchildren are going to be reaping when they're trying to clean up all of the muck that we're creating.
Yeah.
So
the last thing I want to just leave you with as food for thought, as we see all this development happening around us, and we see, you know, them with now trying to add, you know, expand Dyer Road, which if you're out in any of these small, you know, 2-lane roads, if you're seeing a lot of traffic, you need to start considering what happens when the county comes in and tries to widen this road, because they're going to take part of your property. They are down Dyer wanting to put in a roundabout that's going to take out chunks of people's yards. So there's a lot happening, and there's a lot of development happening, and there's a lot of people making a lot of money at what cost. And so that's what we need citizens to be aware of and to be paying attention to, and start doing your own research, make your own opinions, form your own opinions. The information is out there, but it's just a matter of being able to have the time to comb through it all. And that's, you know, what we hope to help at least give you the places to go a little bit easier than you having to hunt them all on your own.
100%. And I think for those people who don't have time and they're, you know, maybe they don't see value in looking at those things, I think if anything, it's just an invitation to also care.
Yeah.
Like to actually care, you know, like where you go and lay your head at night, you know, it's a special place. Care about it. Care about your neighbors too. I mean, we all share this land. It's like we, you know, there's, and this is a theme that we're going to continue to come back around on the new Melle Pulse. There is so much more in common than we have that divides us. We have so much common ground. Like, we got to just start remembering that.
I think that's the other aspect of, like, when you talk about a lot of this voting with council members that are over districts that aren't, Joe Brazel is over us. But so obviously there's other council members that have, and if you look at the St. Charles County map, like, I didn't really realize how far out we go. Like, we cover a big chunk of land. And so, you've got council people that are voting on our stuff that they're over the O'Fallon district. So they don't live out here, but they still get a say. And so there's something about, you may not live out here, but do you drive out here to enjoy our wineries? Do you drive out here to enjoy the country life and just go for a cruise on the weekends? Like, even if you don't live out here, having respect for your area, and if you don't enjoy the crazy overpacked traffic of O'Fallon and Wentzville, then it would really be important for you to get involved now so that that pattern does not continue to happen out here then. Because just like we saw, he wants it to be Chesterfield. He wants the Darien area to be Chesterfield.
Well, and what's really fascinating too is that we are not an isolated use case in the United States of America. No. This is happening all over. And you know what? There is fantastic examples of counties and municipalities who are handling this well.
Yes.
But we need to not be arrogant and say that we know everything. We need to take a look and be like, are we, just ask the question, just ask the facultative question. Are we doing this in the best way possible? Is there things that we can improve with how we're developing our county? Again, we are not sitting back here saying, let's not develop.
Right.
What we are saying though is let's question how we're doing it. Let's be involved citizens. Let's be educated citizens, and let's care. I think we should wrap up the episode.
I have 5 more things to say, but we're going to stop.
Yeah, we're going to continue. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Melle Pulse. You can submit your own information about this topic. We'd love to hear if you have any facts, if you're involved in any way. If you want to bring, something to us that you feel like would be helpful that we mention on this podcast, please do. NewMellePulse.news. You can submit an inquiry there. You can find our podcast on all the streaming platforms: Spotify, Amazon, Apple. We post the videos on YouTube as well. Follow us on Facebook. We post a lot of little tidbits and things like that leading up to the episodes and little kind of content in between.
I think that's about it. Catch you guys next week.
Bye for now.
Bye.